Darius Wade was 36 years old, and for 8 years he built his entire life around one woman's dream. He picked up a second job. He deferred his own ambitions. He made flashcards by hand at midnight because they couldn't afford a working printer. He watched $214,000 leave his hands and believed every dollar was an investment in their future. On the morning his wife crossed that graduation stage and became Dr. Adrian Wade, Darius was first on his feet. Then she pulled him into a hallway, reached into her white coat pocket, and handed him a sealed envelope, divorce papers, pre-signed, already filed. She walked back into her own celebration before he could speak. What Darius didn't know yet was that the hidden bank account had been open for 3 years, that the affair had been running for 14 months, that his wife's residency placement wasn't luck, it was a transaction. He thought he'd lost everything. He had no idea what he was about to find. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The iron hissed. A thin cloud of steam rose from the collar of the navy shirt, and Darius Wade pressed the iron slowly, deliberately, the way he did everything. No rushed strokes, no wrinkles left behind. He lifted the iron, checked his work, set it down again where the fabric wasn't quite right. The kitchen was quiet, except for the low murmur of the morning news on the counter TV. Outside, May was doing what May does in this part of the state. Bright sky, soft wind, the kind of morning that makes people feel like things are going well. Today, things were going well. Dr. Adrian Wade. He said it in his head the way he'd been saying it for weeks. Let it sit there. Rolled it around like something precious. 8 years of his life were folded into those 3 words, and he was not ashamed of a single one of those years. Not $1. Not one overnight shift. He hung the shirt on the cabinet knob and smoothed the front panel one last time with his hand. He'd been 27 when she told him. They were sitting at this same kitchen table, smaller apartment then, different table, same feeling of her across from him. And Adrian had slid the medical school brochure toward him like she was confessing something. Her eyes were careful, watching for his reaction before she let herself have one. He hadn't even paused. Then we make it work, he'd said. Simple as that. And they had. Or rather, he had, and she had studied. And that was the arrangement. And he'd been glad to hold it up. The second job came 6 months later. Medical supply courier. Weekends, sometimes weeknights. He'd told Adrian it was easy money, which was a lie, but a kind one. His lower back still reminded him of it on cold mornings. He'd driven those routes for 2.5 years, logging miles through industrial parks and hospital loading docks, learning the geography of every medical facility in a 40-mile radius, the way you learn a thing when your livelihood depends on knowing it. His regular job, operations supervisor at Harmon Regional Freight, he'd kept that whole time, too. 14-hour days weren't unusual. He'd scheduled around her study blocks, made sure the fridge was stocked before her exams, learned to move quietly through the apartment when she needed silence. The night before her Step 1 boards, she'd cried so hard her whole body shook. Not soft crying, the kind that comes from somewhere deep and frightened. He'd sat on the edge of the bed and rubbed her back, and when she finally went still, he'd gone to the desk and started writing. The printer was broken. Had been broken for 2 weeks. Repair costs were $80 they didn't have. So he'd made the flashcards by hand. 214 of them. Pharmacology, pathophysiology, biochemistry. He didn't understand most of what he was writing, but he wrote it carefully, in clean block letters, checking the textbook after each one to make sure he'd gotten it right. She'd woken up at 5 a.m. and found the stack on the desk beside a glass of water. She hadn't said much. She'd just looked at him in a way that, at the time, he thought meant everything. Darius buttoned the navy shirt now and checked himself in the small mirror propped against the backsplash. He was a big man, broad through the shoulders, steady in his stance. But he'd always moved carefully, like a person who understood what it meant to take up space. He looked fine. Good, even. He straightened his collar and nodded once at his reflection. His phone buzzed on the counter. Troy. We're 10 minutes out. Mama wants to know if you got the good parking spot. He smiled. His brother had been trying to protect that parking spot since 7 this morning, which was very Troy. Precise, proactive, already 3 steps ahead of a problem that didn't exist yet. Darius. Tell her I'll find one. Troy. She says that's not an answer. He laughed and set the phone down. Paulette Wade had pressed her church clothes the night before. He knew because she'd called him while she was doing it, talking about the ceremony, about how she planned to be on her feet the moment Adrienne's name was called. That's my daughter up there, she'd said. Far as I'm concerned, she is. That had sat warm in his chest all night. There was one thing he hadn't let himself look at too closely. Since match day, since the afternoon the residency results came in and Adrienne had gotten her placement, she had seemed different. Not unhappy. Almost the opposite. Lighter, somehow. Like a woman whose bags were already packed and sitting by the door, and she was just waiting for the car to arrive. He'd noticed it the way you notice a sound you can't quite identify. There, then gone, then there again. He'd told himself it was relief. Excitement! The finish line after 8 years. Of course, she seemed different. He picked up the flowers from the counter, yellow and white, her favorites, and headed for the door. Today was her day. He was going to make sure she knew he knew that. The drive to the university was 22 minutes. He took it at an easy speed. Windows down, flowers lying on the passenger seat in their paper wrapping, the morning air moving through the car. His chest was full. The university gymnasium had been transformed. White and gold banners hung from the rafters. Rows of folding chairs stretched from wall to wall, already filling up with families dressed in their finest. Mothers in bright dresses, fathers in ties they'd borrowed or bought special for the occasion. The air smelled like perfume and fresh flowers, and that particular human warmth that comes from too many proud people crowded into one space. Darius found Paulette and Troy in the 3rd row. Paulette was wearing her cream-colored dress with the pearl buttons, her good shoes, her hair pressed neat. She stood up when she saw him coming and straightened his collar, even though it didn't need it. "You look nice," she said. "You look better," he told her. Troy was on Paulette's other side, long legs stretched out, already scanning the program. He glanced up at Darius and gave a short nod, a whole conversation in one gesture. "Good. You're here. We're ready." They sat. The row filled in around them. Music started low from somewhere near the stage. When the graduates walked in, Paulette gripped Darius's arm. They came through the side doors in a slow procession. Black robes, gold sashes, faces split wide with relief and joy. Family members leaned into the aisles, phones raised, calling out names. Someone 3 rows back started crying before the first candidate reached the stage. Darius sat very still and watched the door. Then Adrienne was there. She walked the way she always carried herself. Head level, back straight, composed in a way that looked effortless because she'd practiced it into instinct. Her name was printed in the program. Adrienne C. Wade, M.D. She was smiling at the crowd without focusing on any one face. When she crossed the stage and the dean spoke her name into the microphone, Dr. Adrienne Wade. Darius was on his feet before the words were fully out. He clapped until his palms stung. He didn't care who saw. Paulette was beside him, one hand over her mouth, the other reaching for his elbow. Troy clapped steadily, chin up, watching his sister-in-law accept her hood, with the quiet satisfaction of a man watching a long investment pay out. On stage, Adrienne looked briefly toward their row. She smiled. It was the right smile for the moment. Warm, appropriate. Darius smiled back and thought about the 214 flashcards. The reception was held at the Meridian Hotel, 4 blocks from campus. A bright, high-ceilinged ballroom, round tables with white linens, the residency program's logo on every napkin. A jazz trio played softly near the entrance. Waitstaff moved through the crowd with champagne and small plates. Darius stayed close to Paulette for the first hour, making the rounds, shaking hands with people whose names he'd heard for years. Classmates, professors, the program coordinator who had always remembered to ask about him specifically. "You must be so proud," they said, again and again. "I am," he said, and meant it every time. He was refilling Paulette's glass of sparkling water when he noticed the man. He was standing near the far end of the room, slightly apart from the cluster of attending physicians around him, tall, well-built, somewhere in his mid-40s, dark suit, a kind of settled authority in the way he occupied space, the posture of a man who was used to rooms arranging themselves around him. He was watching Adrian, not the way a proud professor watches a graduating student, not with professional satisfaction, with something quieter than that, and more specific, a quality of ownership that wasn't about the degree or the occasion. Adrian moved across the room to greet a classmate, and his gaze followed her exactly the way a compass needle follows north. Darius looked at the man's face, filed it, looked away. He refilled his own glass, said something to Troy that he immediately forgot. The jazz trio shifted into something slower. 20 minutes later, Adrienne appeared at his elbow. "Can I borrow you for a second?" she said. Her voice was light, conversational. He followed her out through a side door into a carpeted corridor, quieter than the ballroom, lit by long fluorescent panels. The sounds of the party faded. She stopped, turned to face him. Her expression was composed, still. The specific kind of stillness that isn't calm. It's preparation. She reached into the pocket of her white coat, and she produced a sealed envelope. She held it out to him. "It's a no-fault filing," she said. "I've already retained an attorney. I hope we can handle this civilly." He looked at the envelope. He looked at her face. She had practiced this. He understood, in that moment, with a clarity that felt almost physical, that she had practiced this exact moment. The tone, the words, the hand that wasn't shaking. He took the envelope. She walked back into the party. The door swung closed. The corridor was very quiet. Darius stood there with the envelope in his hand. He did not open it. He put it in the inside pocket of his jacket, against his chest, and stood for a moment breathing in the empty hallway. Then he went back inside. He said goodbye to Paulette. He told her he was tired. He hugged her once, longer than usual. He drove home alone. He sat in his dark driveway for a long time. The engine was off. The flowers, still in their paper wrapping on the passenger seat, had started to droop in the warmth. The envelope was in his lap. He hadn't opened it. He didn't cry right away. It came up slowly, the way things come up when you've been holding them at arm's length all day. His throat tightened first, then his eyes, then his hands pressed flat against the envelope, and he bent forward over the steering wheel, alone in the dark, and wept. 3 days later, the envelope was still on the kitchen table. Darius hadn't avoided it. He'd simply waited until he was ready, until the shock had settled into something he could think through, until the mornings didn't feel like climbing out of cold water. He was a man who read the whole contract before he signed anything. He wasn't going to read this one until he could see it clearly. Saturday morning, early. The coffee was made. The legal pad was open beside him, pen uncapped. He picked up the envelope and opened it. The filing itself was 11 pages. Clean formatting. Professional. Her attorney had done good work. Darius read every word. He read the grounds for dissolution, irreconcilable differences, no fault, standard language. He read the asset inventory, the house, the joint checking account, the car she'd already taken. He read the proposed division, which was aggressive but not surprising. She'd had time to prepare this, time he now understood she'd spent deliberately. He made notes on the legal pad in his small, precise handwriting. Questions, numbers, items he wanted to look at more closely. He was on page 8 when he stopped. It was in the financial disclosures section, the part of a divorce filing where both parties are required to list their accounts, assets, and liabilities. Most people skim it. Darius did not skim things. There, near the bottom of a dense column of figures, was a line item for a savings account. Account ending in 4471. Listed as individual account, pre-marital origin. Darius stared at that line for a long time. He had been with Adrian for 9 years, married for 8. He knew every account they had together. He knew the joint checking, the joint savings, her student loan account, the medical school payment portal he'd logged into so many times he still remembered the password. He had never heard of an account ending in 4471. He wrote the number on the legal pad. He circled it. Then he picked up his phone and called Troy. "I need you to come over," Darius said. "Bring your laptop." Troy didn't ask questions. He was there in 30 minutes. They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where they'd eaten hundreds of Sunday dinners, where Darius had once spread out 4 months of receipts to do their taxes by hand, where Adrian had studied for her Step 2 word, 2 boards, while Darius kept her coffee warm. Troy opened his laptop. Darius slid the divorce filing across the table and pointed to the line. Troy looked at it. Then he looked at Darius. "You didn't know about this?" "No." Troy turned back to the screen and started working. Darius sat across from him and drank his coffee and waited. He was good at waiting. It took Troy just under 2 hours. He had a contact at a financial compliance firm, a woman he'd gone to school with who owed him a favor, and she helped him trace the routing number attached to the account number. Darius watched his brother's face while he worked. The small furrow between his brows that meant he was focused. The slight stillness when something landed. Troy sat back. "The routing number ties to a private banking branch," he said. "Regional outfit. Small. They primarily service medical professionals." He paused. "It's the same branch used by attending staff at Mercy General." Darius knew the name. It was the hospital where Adrian had matched for her residency, the hospital where Victor Ashby was a department head. "How much is in it?" Darius asked. Troy's jaw tightened slightly. "It's not about what's in it now. It's what went in over time." He turned the laptop to face Darius. $47,000. 31 months of deposits. Regular. Consistent. Like a paycheck going into a separate pocket. Darius looked at the screen. 31 months. 2.5 years. He thought about the second courier job he'd picked up. The one he'd told her was easy money. He thought about the vacation fund they'd talked about every January and never touched. He thought about the printer they couldn't fix, the handmade flashcards, the overtime he'd worked so many Saturdays that the forklift guys had started calling him a ghost. He said it out loud, not because he needed Troy to confirm it, but because hearing it in his own voice made it real. "She was saving up to leave me," he said, "while I was paying her tuition." The kitchen was very quiet. "Darius, don't." His voice was even, almost gentle. "I'm not asking you to say anything. I just needed to say it." He looked at the legal pad, the circled account number, the 11 pages of a plan she'd been building while he was building a life he thought they shared. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Don't tell Mama yet?" "Not until I know everything." Troy nodded once. Darius pulled the legal pad toward him. He looked at the circled number for another long moment. Then he picked up his phone. He'd heard Odessa Grant's name twice, once from a man at his job whose divorce had nearly cost him his house, and once from that same man 3 years later, explaining why he still had it. That was the kind of referral that meant something. He found the number. He dialed. It rang twice. Odessa Grant. "My name is Darius Wade," he said. "I need a consultation. It's urgent." He listened. He answered her questions briefly and precisely, the way he did everything. When she gave him a time, he wrote it on the legal pad in the same small handwriting he'd used for the account number, the routing number, and every other piece of this thing he was only beginning to understand. He ended the call. He set the phone down on the table. He looked at the divorce filing, at her name on the first page, the title she'd spent 8 years and his money earning, the document she had handed him in a hallway while the party went on behind her. Something in his chest that had been soft for 3 days went solid. Not hot, not loud, just solid. He reached for the pen and turned to a clean page on the legal pad. He began to write. Odessa Grant's office was on the 4th floor of a narrow brick building downtown, the kind of building that had been there for 50 years and wasn't trying to impress anyone. The waiting area had 2 chairs, a small table, and a framed print of Harriet Tubman on the wall. No flowers, no soft music, just clean light coming through Venetian blinds and the distant sound of traffic below. Darius was early. He sat with the folder on his lap and waited. Odessa herself came out at exactly 9 a.m. She was shorter than her voice had suggested, compact, dark-skinned, with close-cropped natural hair and reading glasses pushed up on her head. She wore a charcoal blazer and moved like someone who had nowhere to be except exactly where she was going. She did not smile warmly. She shook his hand once, firmly, and said, "Come in." Her office was organized the way Darius liked things organized. Everything visible, everything intentional. She sat behind her desk. He sat across from it. He placed the folder on the surface between them without being asked. She opened it. She read. She did not speak for several minutes. Darius respected that. When she looked up, she said, "Tell me about the account." He told her. Concise. Factual. The routing number. The banking branch. The 31 months. The $47,000. Troy's findings. The connection to Mercy General. Odessa listened with her hands flat on the desk. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "In this state, documented financial support for a spouse's professional education creates a reimbursement claim. It's not automatic, but it's legitimate, especially in a long-term marriage where one party demonstrably reduced their own financial advancement to fund the others." She tapped the folder. "But this account changes the shape of the whole thing. It's not just a divorce filing anymore. If she was systematically moving money into a private account over 2.5 years, during the marriage, without your knowledge, that's financial fraud. That's concealment of marital assets." Darius nodded slowly. "What do you need from me?" "Everything," she said. It wasn't dramatic. It was just precise. Every tuition payment, every loan in your name, every joint bill you paid alone, receipts, bank statements, tax returns. If you wrote a check for it or your name is on the account, I need to see it. We're going to build a number. How long do I have? I want it within the week." He stood, picked up the folder and said, "You'll have it." He and Troy spent 4 evenings at the kitchen table. Troy brought his laptop and his professional patience. Darius brought 8 years of records he'd kept in a filing cabinet in the spare bedroom. The organized kind, labeled and sorted, because that's how he'd always been. Every January he filed the year away. He had never imagined this was why. They pulled everything. Tuition payments to the medical school, 4 years of them, each one documented, most of them coming directly from Darius's accounts. The federal loans that had been taken in his name because her credit, early in the marriage, wasn't strong enough to carry them alone. The monthly bills, utilities, insurance, groceries, the car note, during every rotation year when her stipend barely covered her student fees. Troy built the spreadsheet. Darius fed him the numbers. The total climbed slowly. the way something large reveals itself, not all at once, but in steady increments that become impossible to ignore. On Thursday night, Troy stopped typing. He looked at the screen for a moment. $214,000, he said. Darius looked at the number. He didn't say anything. He just looked at it. The sum of 8 years reduced to digits on a screen. The second job, the vacation fund, the flash cards, the overtime Saturdays, the printer they couldn't fix. $214,000. He wrote it on the legal pad and underlined it once. Adrienne came for the rest of her things on a Tuesday. Darius was at work. He'd known she was coming, her attorney had given notice, and he had chosen deliberately to be gone. He came home that evening to a house that was noticeably lighter. Certain shelves bare, the hooks by the door missing her coat, her reading chair gone from the corner of the bedroom. On the kitchen counter, she'd left a note, folded once, his name written on the outside in her clean, precise handwriting. He opened it. Darius, thank you for everything. I hope you know that none of this takes away from what we had. A. He read it twice. Then he set it down and went to the spare bedroom to finish clearing the filing cabinet she'd left behind. A 2-drawer unit she'd used for her own paperwork during school. The top drawer was empty. The bottom drawer had a hanging folder with a few old documents, her undergraduate transcripts, a copy of her MCAT scores. In the back of the folder, tucked flat against the cardboard, he found 2 things: a hotel key card, white, unmarked, the kind that could have been from anywhere, and behind it, a birthday card. The front had a simple design, clean, expensive-looking. He opened it. The handwriting inside was not his. To the future, Dr. Wade. I'll make sure you get everything you deserve. V. The date was printed at the top in Adrienne's handwriting, the way she always marked cards before she filed them. 14 months ago. Darius stood in the spare bedroom for a long moment. The light was on. The filing cabinet drawer was still open. The card was in his hands. He set the card on top of the cabinet. He took out his phone. He photographed the card. He photographed the key card beside it. He photographed them together. His hands were steady throughout. His face gave nothing away. He put his phone back in his pocket. Darius was at Troy's apartment by 8 in the morning. He didn't call ahead. Troy opened the door in a t-shirt and socks, took one look at his brother's face, and stepped aside. They sat at Troy's small dining table, the one that doubled as a desk, covered in neat stacks of folders, and a second monitor Troy used for overflow work. Darius laid his phone on the table and pulled up the photographs. Troy studied them without touching the phone. The key card first, then the card. He read Victor's handwriting slowly, then looked at the date Adrienne had marked in the top corner. 14 months, Troy said. Yeah. Troy leaned back. He was quiet for a moment. Then he opened his laptop. Give me a minute. It didn't take a minute. It took less. Victor Ashby wasn't hard to find. He had a faculty profile on Mercy General's website. Department head, attending physician, 12 years at the hospital. He had a published research bio and a professional photo taken in front of a window with soft institutional lighting. In it, he looked exactly the way Darius remembered him from the reception. Composed, polished, a man who moved through rooms assuming they would rearrange themselves around him. Troy clicked through to the hospital's residency program page, and there it was. He's on the selection committee, Troy said, his voice going flat. He turned the screen toward Darius. The Internal Medicine Residency Committee. He's been on it for 3 years. Darius looked at the screen. He looked at the list of names. Victor Ashby was second from the top, the same program Adrienne had matched into. He sat with that for a moment. He could feel the shape of something clicking into place, the way a number in a spreadsheet resolves when the last entry is entered, and the sum finally makes sense. Can you find when she applied? Darius asked. Troy was already typing. This part took longer. It wasn't public information, But residency applications went through a national matching system, and there were timestamps embedded in the confirmation documents the program sent to applicants. Documents Adrian had received, printed and filed in the spare bedroom during a year when Darius was paying for everything. He remembered seeing those documents. He'd thought nothing of them. Program correspondence. Administrative paperwork. Troy had photographed the filing cabinet contents the week before as part of the documentation process. He pulled up the images now, enlarging them on his secondary monitor. He found the confirmation letter. He found the timestamp. He stopped. Darius, tell me. Troy turned the monitor so Darius could read the date on the letter. She submitted her application to Ashby's program 6 months before she told you she matched there. The room was quiet. 6 months before, Darius repeated. She didn't randomly match, Troy said carefully. She applied directly to his program. His specific program. 6 months before she ever said anything to you about it. Darius placed both hands flat on the table. He stared at the screen. The picture assembled itself in full now, and there was nothing left to guess at. Adrienne had not made a sudden decision. She had not stumbled into an affair and then scrambled to recover her life. She had drawn a plan, careful, long, constructed over years, and she had worked it step by step. Victor hadn't been a distraction from her career. He had been the next rung on a ladder she'd been climbing while Darius was paying the rent. She had used Victor to guarantee her placement, and she had used Darius to fund the degree that put her in the room to be placed. The hidden account, the birthday card, the residency application, the pre-prepared envelope. None of it was sudden. None of it was impulsive. All of it was deliberate. She planned this for over 2 years, Darius said. Not a question, just the fact, stated plainly, because it needed to be said out loud at least once. Troy said nothing. He didn't have to. Darius sat still for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone and called Odessa. He told her everything in order. The committee roll, the application timestamp, the 6 months. He read her the date on the confirmation letter and the date Adrienne had told him about the match. Odessa was quiet for longer than usual. When she spoke, her voice had a different quality to it. Not warmer, exactly, but sharper. Like something had come into focus for her, too. That's not just a divorce case anymore, she said. What you're describing, a sitting committee member influencing a selection process for a personal relationship, that's a professional ethics violation. A serious one. There's a board process for this. I know exactly who to call. Make the call, Darius said. I will. He drove home with the windows down. The morning air was cool and flat, the kind of air that doesn't ask anything of you. He kept both hands on the wheel, drove the speed limit, stopped fully at every stop sign. Back in her office, Odessa Grant pulled up a blank document on her screen. She set her reading glasses on her nose, positioned her fingers on the keyboard, and began to draft the formal ethics complaint against Victor Ashby. Darius turned onto his street. He pulled into his driveway. He sat for a moment, looking at the front of the house. Then he got out of the car and went inside. Odessa filed at 9:04 in the morning. Darius knew because she sent him a one-line email with the timestamp and a scanned copy of the filing attached. No commentary, no reassurance, just the document and the time, which was exactly what he'd asked for and exactly what he needed. He read through it at his kitchen table with his second cup of coffee. The language was precise and cold in the way legal language always is, formal phrasing wrapped around real things, turning human wreckage into numbered paragraphs. But the substance was clear. Formal contest to the no-fault filing, financial fraud allegation, full asset discovery requested, the hidden account named explicitly, with dates and deposit totals. 14 pages. 8 years. 1 filing. He closed the document and went to work. Odessa placed the asset hold the same morning, before noon. It was clean and surgical. A formal legal notice to the joint account institution, flagging the undisclosed account and blocking any transfer of marital assets pending the discovery process. Adrienne's carefully arranged financial exit had just been frozen mid-step. She wouldn't know it until she tried to move something and found it wouldn't move. She didn't know yet. That was the part Darius kept returning to as he sat at his desk at the freight yard, working through a routing issue on a delayed shipment. Adrienne was somewhere in her new life right now. Maybe at the hospital. Maybe with Victor, moving through her day with the quiet confidence of a woman who believed she had already won. She had signed papers. She had secured an attorney. She had planned for years and executed cleanly, and walked away from a party without looking back. She didn't know what was already in motion. Darius approved the rerouted shipment and moved on to the next item in his queue. That evening he drove to Paulette's house. She lived 20 minutes away in the same neighborhood where Darius had grown up. A small brick house with a front porch and a flower bed she maintained with the same deliberate care she applied to everything in her life. The lights were on inside. He could see the blue flicker of the television through the curtain. She opened the door before he knocked. She'd seen his headlights from the window. "Come in," she said. She looked at his face and didn't ask any questions. She just stepped back and let him inside. They sat at her kitchen table, the same table where Darius had done homework as a boy, where Paulette had graded papers on weekend evenings, where the family had eaten every holiday meal he could remember. She put a glass of water in front of him without being asked. He told her everything. He started at the beginning and moved forward in order, the same way he'd told Odessa, because the order mattered. The hidden account, the routing number, the birthday card, and the hotel key card. Victor's name, his role on the selection committee, the timestamp on the application letter, the $214,000, the pre-prepared envelope in Adrienne's white coat pocket. Paulette did not say a word. She sat across from him with her hands folded on the table, and she listened. Her face did not collapse. It did not harden into anything dramatic. She simply took it in, piece by piece, the way a person absorbs something they already half knew was coming, but had not let themselves fully believe. When he finished, the kitchen was very quiet. Paulette looked down at her folded hands. She was still for a long moment. Then she said, "I pressed her graduation hood the night before the ceremony. She brought it over, said the rental place had folded it wrong, that it needed pressing. I told her I'd take care of it." She paused. "She let me do that." She said it simply. No performance in it, just the fact. Darius looked at his mother and felt something crack open in his chest that he didn't have a name for. Not for himself. For her. Because she had loved Adrienne the way she loved her own, completely, without reservation. And Adrienne had sat in this kitchen and handed her the hood to press and said thank you and driven home to finish packing. "Mama?" "No," Paulette said, gently but firmly. She looked up at him. Her eyes were clear. "Whatever you need from me, you have it." That was all she said. She did not pick up her phone and call Adrienne that night. She did not send a message. She did not reach out through church friends or family to say her piece. She simply went quiet, completely and permanently quiet, in the direction of a woman she had once ironed a hood for. 2 days later, Darius's phone rang. Adrienne's name on the screen. He let it ring once more, then answered. "There's a legal hold on our accounts." Her voice was controlled but tight at the edges, the first note of alarm he had ever heard in it. "I need to know what's going on." Darius leaned back in his chair. "I've retained an attorney," he said. His voice was even, unhurried. "I'm looking forward to the discovery process." He ended the call and set the phone face down on the table. The call came at 7:22 in the morning. Darius was at his kitchen table, coffee going cold beside him, working through a freight compliance report that needed to be submitted before 9. The number on his screen was unfamiliar, a local area code, but not one he recognized. He almost let it go to voicemail. He answered instead. Darius. The voice was smooth, assured. The voice of a man who had never in his life picked up a phone, uncertain of his welcome. This is Victor Ashby. I'm calling because I think it's time you and I had a direct conversation. Man to man. Darius said nothing. He reached across the table and pressed the small red circle on his recording app. His thumb moved quietly, without urgency, the way he pressed any button on any ordinary morning. I understand you're going through something difficult right now, Victor continued. Divorce is hard. I've seen it. There's a grieving process, and that's real. And I respect that. A brief pause, calibrated to suggest empathy. But I think some of the decisions being made right now are being driven by emotion rather than clear thinking. And I want to give you the opportunity to step back from that. Darius set his pen down on the legal pad. He did not speak. You're a smart man, Victor said. I've heard that. Adrian always spoke highly of you. And smart men know when a situation is, let's say, above the level where it needs to be. You filed some paperwork. That's your right. But there are people involved in this, professionally, who have worked a long time to build what they've built. Another pause. Physicians, hospital administrators, people with long memories. A man in your position, in your field, should think carefully about the relationships he chooses to complicate. There it was. Darius heard it clearly. Not a threat shaped like a threat. A threat shaped like advice. The kind that left no fingerprints, designed to land softly enough that the man saying it could later claim he'd only been trying to help. I hear you, Darius said. His voice was flat, polite, completely neutral. I'm glad, Victor said, and Darius could hear the small satisfaction in it, the assumption of leverage confirmed. I think if we all approach this reasonably, there's a path forward that doesn't have to get messy for anybody. Adrian wants to move on. You deserve to move on. The legal back and forth, the filings, the holds. None of that serves either of you. I appreciate you calling, Darius said. Of course. I just think I'll be in touch, Darius said. He ended the call. He sat for a moment with his hand resting on the phone. Outside, a garbage truck moved slowly down the block, its mechanical groan loud and then fading. The kitchen was quiet again. He opened his email, attached the recording file, and typed a single line to Odessa Grant. Call me when you have a few minutes. I have something for you. Her response came 40 minutes later. On a call. Give me 20. She called in 15. Darius played her the recording over the phone without commentary. He listened to it again himself while she listened. Victor's smooth cadence, the rehearsed empathy, the soft edge of the threat tucked inside the word carefully. When it ended, Odessa was quiet. Then she said, "Play it again." He did. When it finished the second time, he heard her exhale, slow and deliberate, like a person setting something down carefully so they didn't drop it. Single-party consent state. Yes, Darius said, and he called you unsolicited. 7:22 this morning. Okay, she was already moving. He could hear it in her voice, the shift into motion. I'm going to finish my current call, and then I'm going to contact the Ethics Board's intake line. What he just did, using a personal call to discourage a complainant from pursuing a legitimate legal and ethics process. That is its own violation, on top of everything we already have. A brief pause. He just handed us the thread, Darius. He didn't know he was doing it, but he did. Darius said nothing. The complaint is now formally active as of this call, Odessa continued. I'll have everything submitted to intake by end of day. And once the hospital's legal team gets wind of what's in this complaint, and they will, they're going to start calculating their own exposure. A department head on a residency selection committee, documented personal relationship with a candidate, and now a recorded call attempting to interfere with proceedings. She paused again. They will not protect him. It will not be worth it to them. All right, Darius said. Everything is in position, Odessa said. The Discovery Conference will be scheduled within the next 2 weeks. I'll send you the date as soon as it's confirmed. I'll be ready, Darius said. He ended the call. He set the phone down on the table. He pulled the laptop toward him, the one with the browser tab he'd opened 3 days ago and hadn't closed, the Executive MBA application. He'd been filling it out slowly, in the quiet hours, a section at a time. He found his place on the page and kept writing. The conference room was on the 14th floor of a glass office building downtown, and it had the kind of silence that felt deliberate. Thick carpet, no windows that opened, air that smelled like recycled cold. A long table ran down the center of the room. 8 chairs, 4 on each side. Darius arrived first. He wore the same navy shirt from graduation day. He had not planned it that way. He had reached into the closet that morning, and his hand found it, and he had put it on without ceremony, the way he put on anything. He sat down on the left side of the table and set a single manila folder in front of him. He did not open it. He folded his hands and waited. Odessa arrived 2 minutes later, rolling a small case behind her. She set it beside her chair, placed a neat stack of folders on the table, and looked at Darius once. "You good?" she said. "I'm good," he said. She nodded and opened the first folder. Adrian and her attorney arrived at 9:10. The attorney was a compact man in a gray suit, competent-looking, organized, carrying his own stack of documents. He sat down across from Odessa without making eye contact and arranged his papers carefully. Adrian sat across from Darius. She was wearing a dark blazer. Her hair was pulled back. She looked exactly the way she always looked, composed, precise, as though she had already decided how this meeting would go and was simply waiting for everyone else to catch up. She did not look at him when she sat down. He looked at her. Odessa opened the proceeding without warmth or delay. "We're here because your client filed a no-fault divorce petition that misrepresented the marital financial picture," she said to the opposing attorney. "I'm going to walk through the documentation. I'd ask that you hold questions until I'm finished." She laid the first sheet on the table and slid a copy across. Documented financial contributions from Darius Wade to the marital unit over 8 years. Tuition payments? Private loans in his name? Household expenses carried solely on his income. Total, with supporting receipts and bank statements, $214,000. The opposing attorney looked at the page. He didn't move. Second item. Odessa placed another document on the table. A separate savings account in Adrian Wade's name, not disclosed in the original filing. The account was opened 31 months ago. At time of discovery, it held $47,000. The routing number traces to a private branch used primarily by physicians and staff at Mercy General Hospital. Adrian's attorney looked up from the page. He looked at Adrian. She did not look at him. Third item. A photograph, printed cleanly. A birthday card recovered from a filing cabinet left in the marital home. The card is signed by Victor Ashby and dated 14 months ago. The language in the card references Dr. Adrian Wade by her future title, before she had completed her degree. The room was very quiet. Fourth item. Odessa set down a printed timeline. Application records showing that Adrian Wade submitted her residency application specifically to the program headed by Victor Ashby. 6 months before she informed her husband she had matched there. She did not match randomly. She applied directly. At the time of application, she and the program director had an existing personal relationship. The opposing attorney set his pen down. He set it down slowly, the way a person sets something down when they need both hands free to think. Fifth item. Odessa pressed a button on a small device on the table. A phone call placed by Victor Ashby to Darius Wade at 7:22 a.m. 10 days ago. Recorded under single-party consent, which is legal in this state. The call has been submitted as supplemental material to the Active Ethics Board complaint. Victor's voice filled the room, smooth and assured. A man in your position should think carefully about the relationships he chooses to complicate. Odessa stopped the recording. Adrienne looked at the table. Darius watched her. He watched the stillness leave her face. Not all at once, but in layers, the way ice cracks before it gives. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes moved without landing on anything. It was the first time he had ever seen her not know what to do next. He leaned forward slightly. "You planned this," he said. His voice was low and even. "While I was working doubles to keep your lights on. While I was making flashcards by hand because we couldn't afford a printer. You were planning." He paused. "I just need you to know that I know every piece of it. All of it." She didn't answer. She didn't look at him. Her attorney cleared his throat and said, "I'd like to request a brief recess." "No," Odessa said simply. She reached into the folder and produced a clean, tabbed document. "I have a settlement on the table. It's non-negotiable, and your client should read it carefully." She slid it across. The terms were clean and without mercy. Full reimbursement of $214,000, structured across 7 years from Adrienne's physician salary. Forfeiture of all claims to the marital home. No spousal support in either direction. Full mutual release upon completion. Adrienne's attorney read it once. Then he read it again. Then he leaned slightly toward Adrienne and spoke quietly, close to her ear. Darius could not hear the words. He didn't need to. He watched Adrienne's face while her attorney spoke. He watched the last calculation she was running. The same sharp, tactical intelligence that had built the plan that brought them here, now turned toward the wreckage of it, looking for a way out that wasn't there. Her attorney leaned back. She picked up the pen. She signed it on the last page, in the space above the signature line. Her handwriting was precise and clear. Dr. Adrienne Wade. She stood, gathered nothing from the table. There was nothing there that belonged to her anymore, and walked to the door. She opened it without pausing. She did not look back. The call came on a Thursday morning. Darius was at his desk at work, reviewing a routing manifest, when his phone buzzed with Odessa's name. He set the manifest aside and answered. "Ethics Board opened the formal investigation this morning," Odessa said. No greeting. She never wasted time on greetings. "Victor Ashby is on administrative leave as of yesterday afternoon. The hospital moved fast. Faster than I expected, honestly. Their legal team knows what the exposure looks like." Darius leaned back in his chair. Through the window of his office, he could see the freight yard. Rows of containers lined up clean and orderly. Trucks pulling in and out on schedule. What does that mean for the residency? Program director has flagged her start date. Nothing official yet, but she's been told the placement is under review, pending the investigation's outcome. Odessa paused. She has the degree. She passed her boards. She'll land somewhere eventually. But the specific program she engineered herself into, that door is most likely closed. Darius said, "Okay. That's all you've got? Okay?" "That's all I've got," he said. He heard something that might have been a short laugh on her end. "I'll send the formal confirmation in writing this afternoon. First reimbursement payment is scheduled for the 15th. Make sure your account information hasn't changed." "It hasn't," he said. "Thank you, Odessa." "Do good things with it," she said, and hung up. Darius sat with the phone in his hand for a moment. Then he set it face down on the desk and picked the routing manifest back up. He finished his shift. He drove home. He made dinner. Nothing elaborate, just rice and chicken and whatever vegetables were in the refrigerator. He ate at the kitchen table with the news on low in the other room, and his MBA coursework open beside his plate. He slept well that night. He had been sleeping well for weeks. The news about Victor moved through certain circles the way news always does. Not announced, just suddenly known. Paulette said nothing about it publicly. She did not make calls. She did not send messages. She did not say Adrienne's name at church, or at the neighborhood association meeting, or at the monthly dinner she hosted for the women she'd known for 30 years. She simply said nothing. And in the particular world Paulette Wade inhabited, where she had spent decades being warm and present and generous with her words, her silence had weight. The women noticed. They did not ask direct questions, because they did not need to. They watched Paulette's face when Adrienne's name came up, and they saw exactly what they needed to see. A woman who had closed a door and locked it, and was not going to explain why. The social architecture Adrienne had assumed would be there. The extended family goodwill, the community warmth, the network of people who had watched her graduate and celebrated her success, quietly stepped to the side, not with hostility, not with confrontation, just with absence. It was, in its own way, more complete than anything louder could have been. Adrienne called on a Sunday evening 3 weeks after the settlement. Darius was on the couch with a book when his phone lit up with her number. He looked at it for one ring. Then he answered. "I need to say something," she said. Her voice was even, controlled. She sounded like herself. He said nothing. He waited. "What I did was practical," she said. "I know you don't see it that way, but I worked. I worked incredibly hard for that degree. For years. Every exam, every rotation, every overnight shift in that hospital. I earned it. Whatever else happened between us, I earned that." Darius looked at the far wall. He let her finish. "I just think you need to understand that," she said. "I'm not a bad person. I made calculated decisions, and I worked hard, and I built something real." There was a pause. She seemed to be waiting for him to respond. To argue, maybe, or to agree, or to finally let some of the feeling out that she had always expected was underneath his quiet. He didn't give her any of it. "You earned it," he said. His voice was calm and flat as a table. "I paid for it, and now you're paying me back." He let that sit for exactly 1 second. "We're square." She didn't say anything. "Take care of yourself, Adrienne," he said. He ended the call. He set the phone down on the cushion beside him and picked his book back up. Found his page. The evening was quiet. The house was his. Every room, every piece of furniture, every inch of it, and the quiet in it felt different than it used to. Not empty, just still. He read until he was tired. Then he turned off the lamp and went to bed. He never spoke to her again. 14 months. That was how long it had taken the kitchen table to feel like a kitchen table again. Darius sat at it now. Early morning, the sky outside still gray and soft at the edges, coffee steaming in the mug beside his elbow. His MBA coursework was spread in front of him. A highlighter, a legal pad with notes in his own handwriting. The kind of work that belonged entirely to him, paid for entirely by him, chosen entirely by him. He had enrolled in the executive program 8 months ago, not because anyone told him to, not because he needed the credential to keep his job. He had enrolled because one evening he was sitting in this same chair and he realized that for 8 years he had been quietly setting aside every ambition that wasn't directly useful to someone else's goals, and that the thing he had always been curious about, the business side of operations, the strategy behind the systems he managed every day, had just been sitting there waiting on him to come back for it. So he did. The first reimbursement payment had cleared the last of his personal debt in the 2nd month. The second payment had gone straight into the savings account, the real one, the one that had always been his, the account that was finally growing the way it was supposed to. The house had been his on paper for 14 months. But it had taken a little longer than that for it to feel true in his body, the way he moved through it in the morning, unhurried, without the low-grade awareness of someone sharing space with a person who had already left. Now it just felt like home. Troy had been promoted in the spring, senior associate, which meant better hours and a small team of his own to manage. He had called Darius from the parking lot right after he found out, and Darius could hear him grinning through the phone before he even said a word. Sunday dinners at Paulette's had become a fixed thing. Every week, without planning, Darius would pull up, and Troy's car would already be in the driveway, and he could smell whatever Paulette had made before he even got to the door. There was no performance to it. No one was on their best behavior. No one was managing the energy in the room. It was just the three of them at the table, talking about nothing, talking about everything. Darius had thought about that more than once, how much quieter those dinners felt now, and how that quietness was actually the sound of a room that wasn't working around something. The table felt like what it had always been supposed to be, simple, loud sometimes, comfortable all the time. He had met someone. Her name was Renata. She worked in hospital administration. The irony of that had not escaped him, or Troy, who had made exactly one joke about it and then let it go. She was easy to talk to. She laughed fast, and it was real when she did. They had been seeing each other for about 5 months, and it was careful and unhurried, and nothing like the full-force feeling he had thrown himself into at 27. That was fine. That was actually better. He was in no rush to be anywhere he hadn't chosen carefully. Victor Ashby had been formally terminated 9 months ago. The ethics board finding was public record. Misuse of professional authority. Inappropriate influence over residency selection. The hospital had made it clean and quick because the alternative was messier than they could afford. Victor was appealing, which meant his name and the full account of what he had done would live in legal documents and public filings for years. Every appeal, every continuance, another entry in the public record. He had called Darius to warn him about making enemies of physicians. Now his name was attached to a finding that would follow him for the rest of his professional life. Adrienne had completed her residency, not at the program she had spent 2 years engineering her way into. That door had closed before she ever walked through it. She had matched, eventually, at a smaller program in a different city. Solid, functional, nothing like what she had planned. She was a doctor. She would always be a doctor. But the life she had built the plan around, the placement, the proximity to Ashby, the clean exit into a world that was already waiting for her, none of it had arrived. She had the degree and the title. She had lost everything else she had tried to take with her. Darius did not think about her often. When he did, it was brief and without heat. Just a fact, filed away. A chapter that had closed. He reached for his coffee and looked around the kitchen. The morning light was starting to come through the window now, slow and pale, touching the countertops, the floor, the table he had sat at through the worst of it, and was sitting at still. He looked at his notes. He looked at the coursework. He looked at the room that was entirely, legally, completely his. Then he picked up his highlighter and went back to reading. He had paid for her future. Turned out, he'd been paying for his own all along. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.